The evidence will show that Lori came to try and serve in her opening statements, but serve she didn't. We're going to talk about those in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Psh, there ain't no sofa back there, but there's a bed. Psh, there's a paw right here. And also, y'all, we have, if they'll let me pick them up, the boys. They are, well, they won't let me pick them up, but they will be making a little debut here in a minute, I can almost assure you. I am manipulating them with treats to keep them quiet while we record this little reaction video, if you will. And what that reaction video is going to be today is the Lori Daybell opening statements, Arizona versus Lori Daybell. This is the trial in regard to her late husband, Charles Vallow. She is alleged to have conspired to have taken his life. So I wanted to mostly focus on this and do kind of like an edited video like this for the opening, just because it's so monumental, right? We've been waiting for years for this. So we're going to just look at it. We're going to chop it up as we go, if you will, dissect it, talk about it, all the things. There's Luke behind me. And, you know, if you're, depending on when you're seeing this, we're streaming it on the podcast channel, watching it together. So tune in there. Or if it's way after that, you can go back and check it out if you want to. So anyways, without further ado, let's review.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have been charged with a crime, a serious crime. And the only question here is, did I commit this crime? Conspiracy. Conspiracy is an agreement between two or more people to commit a crime. Just want to move this closer. Okay, so you see? Okay. There has to be an agreement. There has to be a plan. The evidence in this case will show that Charles Vallow and I got married in February 2006.
Now, before we go any further, first of all, my computer that I'm watching on is right here, so that's why I'm kind of looking this way at times. Also, keep in mind, ain't no doctor, ain't no therapist, ain't no cop, ain't no lawyer, okay? Ain't none of that fancy credential stuff. Only credentials we got up in here is the sofa, which ain't there, and my sass, which is definitely here, okay? So these are just my opinions based on very public information. So you heard this part right here where she's like, you know, to do a conspiracy, there has to be an agreement, blah, 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 blah. And I guess to me that says she's going to be showing there was no agreement, but I'm like, girl, have you heard of text messages? Okay. There was an agreement. Let's keep going.
It will show that it was my fourth marriage and Charles' third marriage. At that time, we each had 2 children. I had Colby, who was 9, and Tylie, who was 3. Charles had Cole, who was also 9, and Zach, who was 7. The evidence will show that our family moved from Austin, Texas to Chandler, Arizona in 2009. The evidence will show that Charles and I adopted our great-nephew, JJ, who was born in 2012. It will also show that Charles and I were married for over 13 years and we're raising 5 children.
Pause there real quick, y'all. I don't know what to say about the evidence will show, but just know that she's going to say this 10 million times. In fact, I'll probably make it the title, like the thumbnail is the evidence will show. And if like people who have watched it, you already know, right? You already know. So that's it. Let's keep going.
The evidence will show that I was a licensed cosmetologist and worked as a hairstylist for 20 years while we lived in Austin, Texas. The evidence will show that Charles was a licensed life insurance salesman and worked as an independent contractor, selling life insurance policies and annuities, and owned his own business.
Okay, so time out. So right there, you see what she's doing. First of all, she's like, look, I was a cosmetologist. Okay, so all this right here, okay, this is professional. Okay, this comes with credentials. This is credentialed. Okay. But also you heard her say Charles Vallow was insurance. She's trying to make it seem like all this, in my opinion, all the stuff that happened was like normal, right? Like, and she'll say that in a minute, like, we always had insurance and blah, 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 right? It's like, almost like y'all are the ones that are weird for thinking that. Sure, Jan.
The evidence will show that Charles and I purchased life insurance policies early in our marriage, and Charles had them issued to the maximum amount possible to each of us. The evidence will show that Charles was 17 years older than me, and that because of Charles' age and an issue that he had with high blood pressure, the maximum amount of life insurance that could be approved for Charles was $1 million. The maximum amount of life insurance that I could be approved for because of my age and my health was $2 million.
Again, she's trying to very much normalize this. And here's the thing. In some scenarios, sure, absolutely. But remember, at the heart of this case, in my opinion, is follow the money. Follow the money. Take all the religious BS that she made up about 104, for all this stuff that they're talking about, zombie, all that stuff. Follow the money. They weaponized extreme beliefs over money, right? So she's trying to normalize this. Again, if you follow me, you already know when I say Nancy Brophy, caveat, all that. When you start hearing people try and normalize this bizarre stuff that centers around unaliving family members and loved ones over insurance, and they start trying to explain it away, and I'm sure at a certain point in time, that insurance was normal, right? It was like, okay, well, let's do this, right? I do this for a living. This is the best thing to do. But then clearly we will see that Lori exploited that at the end of the day.
The evidence will show that throughout our 13-year marriage that we always had life insurance policies. When a 10-year policy lapsed, Charles would shop for another company who would approve us for the maximum amount of life insurance. The evidence will show that this was Charles' job. This is what he did. I helped him in this business, and this is what he did. The evidence will show that in 2016, Charles repurchased a new $2 million life insurance policy on me, and he was the sole beneficiary.
It's giving, hi, we'd like a businesswoman's lunch. What kind of business do you girls do? I invented Post-its. If you know, you know, right? Lori's over here. I answered the phone for years in that business. I want all of his money. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. And this is not to, lessen couples who actually work together like this. Like, I'm immediately thinking of like 2 or 3 couples that I know that legit run a business together, right? And the dude does one part and the wife does one part and whatever. I do not think that's how this played out with Lori. But again, I don't know her. I didn't know her from back then. Maybe it did. I don't know. But again, to me, it's just the normalization of insurance, but also with a slight undertone that she's not saying, and obviously you could never say this, but it's a slight undertone of, I earned it, I deserve it, right? Because remember, Kay ended up getting the thing, and this is all giving, that was my money. That was my money. That's what I'm getting from this.
The evidence will show that Charles and I had a happy marriage for 13 years. That he was, in fact, a baseball player, and that he played high school, college ball, and AAA ball, and that he was, in fact, a left-handed pitcher, a southpaw, they call him, but he was a right-handed batter.
Now, on that right there, so during the opening statements, the state would outline how essentially after they did what they did to Charles, that they set up the scene, and that Alex put the baseball bat in the wrong hand, like the left hand thing or something like that, or the right hand, whatever it was. So I think that what Lori did is when she listened to the state's opening, she changed her opening in accordance with it to account for some of the stuff that went on in there, like the state said.
As could be attested to by anybody who knew Charles well and his high school baseball coach, Greg Davis. The evidence will show that Tylie was, and in 2014, our family moved from Chandler, Arizona to Kauai, Hawaii. We lived there for 3.5 years and returned to Chandler in 2017. The evidence will show that Tylie was 3 years old when Charles and I got married, and that when she became a teenager, the relationship between Tylie and her stepfather, Charles, became so difficult that Tylie and Charles had to seek a therapist, a family therapist, to stop them from fighting.
Cue in the beginning of Lori now blaming Tylie, right? Now, again, remember, none of these people that were involved, and I'm saying involved like just innocent bystander, some of them, but then also think Alex Cox, who was directly involved in taking the lives of people. So none of their victims, I should say, are here obviously anymore, well, except Brandon Boudreaux. Lori blames anyone she can. Now take bias out, take how I might feel about Lori, take all that outside. It would only make sense for the defense, anyone in this situation right here, especially who has no level of like, oh, that's my daughter, I've already been convicted of taking her life. It would be even one step lower to now blame her for this, right? I mean, let's try and set that aside for a minute. It would only make sense to try and base your defense on blaming the people who weren't here to speak for themselves, right? It's really your only hope. And especially when we start seeing the evidence in all the cases, including this one that's lined out, it literally, I was going to say, it's like, girl, why'd you take it to trial, but I think we know why she took it to trial, right? And we're going to see that play out day by day, or depending on when you're watching this, we might have already seen it. This is revenge. This is getting the last word. This is narcissism. This is all those things. Okay, let's keep going.
The evidence will show that together, Charles and Tylie met with this therapist after we moved back to the mainland in 2017. The evidence will show that in April of 2018, Tylie's biological father passed away from a heart attack. And at that time, Charles called Social Security and made an appointment at the Social Security office.
Object to hearsay?
Sustain.
You know that cooked her grits, okay? Cooked her grits, even made him a little bit grizzly. You know, she was like, if she was on the outside, she was like, oh girl, I'm calling the Zalima up. 100% tornado's getting directed at your house tonight, and a house is dropping on your sister, okay? 100%. She's already cooking up a storm. She's talking to Zalima in the portal right now. She's like, girl, fire one up. Find the states, fire up the tornado over there.
It will show that we did get Social Security for Tylie for her deceased father until she was 18 years old, and she was 15 years old at the time. The evidence will show that Charles and Tylie's fighting increased greatly in January of 2019 when Charles and I temporarily separated. The evidence will show that several people witnessed these terrible arguments between Tylie and Charles that increased to physical in 2019.
Again, just sit here and just go ahead and put a little mark next to currently blaming Tylie. You see how she's making her case for this, right? So now what I talked about earlier where I was like, put everything aside, whatever. Okay, so take all that back down off the bookshelf now. Let's use the context that like most of us are viewing this in. So the depravity of sitting here and low-key blaming your daughter, who you've been convicted of taking her life, is an absolutely new level of low, okay? But sadly one that we're not unfamiliar with in the courtroom setting.
Charles and Tylie had major increasing arguments, two in February of 2019, one of March in 2019, which was captured on video, one in May of 2019, one in June of 2019, and then the worst of all in July 2019. The evidence will show that in March of 2019, Charles pulled JJ out of his special school and moved him to Houston, Texas, while we were temporarily separated. Tylie and I then joined Charles and JJ in Texas in April 2019 to reconcile. The evidence will show that JJ was diagnosed with severe autism when he was 3 years old while we lived in Hawaii. The evidence will show that for 2 years, JJ was attending a school in Gilbert, Arizona, a special school for children with autism. It's called Lauren's Life Academy.
But yet she doesn't have a problem yanking him out, doing all this stuff, One of the things that, I should say, like one of the many things that set wrong with me on the opening statements, and that, you know, I know the jury's not supposed to know about the past stuff or whatever, or, you know, account for it, but listening to Lori, and we'll see some of it more in a minute, trying to act, you know, cared and concerned and, oh, we did this and we did that. Number one, she's utilizing her past self, right? The one that, you know, had JJ in these schools and did this and did that, whatever, okay? Yeah, because people that knew her did testify to, you know, she used to be a really good mom. You know, she wasn't always like what we see or whatever to a certain degree. It's a hard pill to swallow to listen to her talk in that way and use that as leverage and currency.
The evidence will show that in June of 2019, in JJ's best interest, Tylie, JJ, and I moved back to Chandler, Arizona to re-enroll JJ back in Lauren's Life Academy since he had a difficult time with the Houston, Texas schools with no services for his autism. The evidence will show that Charles and I agreed it was in JJ's best interest to be in school where more services were available to him, so Charles and I rented a house here in Chandler. On the day in question, July 11th, 2019, Charles and I were renting two houses. one in Houston, Texas, where he mainly resided, and one in Chandler, Arizona, where I resided with our 2 minor children, Tylie and JJ.
Okay, again, look at how much emphasis she's putting on JJ, autism, in the school, services. We had 2 houses. I was with the 2 minor children, on and on and on. It's, again, I think she's using it as currency, but also like a, look what he stuck me with. Look what he did. Look what he this and that. She leaves big pockets of information out along the way of, now remember, she's having an affair with Chad Daybell. She's falling in love with him. She's planning and plotting the demise of everyone around, all this stuff, right? She's leaving that out, okay? The religious extremism that Charles is going around and saying this is getting bizarre, somebody help, she's planning something. She's skirting around that because you would have to, right? You couldn't bring that up if you were her.
By this time, our 3 older boys, Colby, Cole, and Zach, were adults and not living at home any longer. The evidence will show that during the months of June and July, that my husband, Charles Vallow, began to send me threatening text messages. These messages were seen by my sister Summer, and that worried her. The evidence will show that Charles insisted on flying into Phoenix on July 10th, as we've heard from the state. The evidence will show that I advised Charles that he could not stay with us at the Chandler house because he could not get along with Tylie, and I did not want them to get into another fight like they had 3 weeks prior.
Again, she is completely utilizing the Tylie Charles dynamic as the excuse. Never mind all the text message evidence that will show these subplots going on between her and all these people, right? It's like she's pretending that this doesn't exist. I mean, I guess that's her tactic. Again, you would almost have to, okay? The evidence is so overwhelming, there's very little you can say about it.
The evidence will show that it was ultimately decided between Charles and I on text messages that he would stay in a hotel because he traveled for business all the time and stayed in hotels all the time, and that I would book it for him since I worked for him and booked all of his travel. The evidence will show that Charles did, in fact, fly into Phoenix on Wednesday, July 10th, and stayed in the hotel that I booked for him. The evidence will show that Charles paid to fly my brother Adam Cox into Phoenix from Kansas on the same day, Wednesday, July 10th, 2019. The evidence will show that Charles planned to come to our Chandler home and pick up JJ and drive him to school on Thursday morning, July 11th, 2019. The evidence will also show you that Lauren's Life Academy opens its gates at 8:25 a.m. in the morning. And the evidence will show that Charles showed up at our Chandler residence around 7:30 in the rental car I booked for him on the morning of Thursday, July 11th, 2019. The evidence will show that Charles began texting with my brother, Adam Cox, before he entered our residence.
Now remember, at this point, Charles knows. He knows something's going on. Things are not right, this, that, and the other. And what we're listening to is Lori literally, number one, trying to plan up almost like a conspiracy against her by these guys, right? Again, setting that aside and being like, no, this is, I knew there was going to be a thing between Tylie and Charles. I was trying to avoid that. I didn't think it was safe to have him around and blah, 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 blah. Now, also keep in mind that anyone who spoke out against Lori or called her out was deemed a zombie, was deemed dark, and many of them ended up disappearing and dying.
And that Charles and Adam were discussing in their text communications that my other brother, Alex Cox, was at the residence. The evidence will show that on the morning of July 11th, that Tylie was asleep in her room and my brother Alex was asleep in the guest room. The evidence will show that when Charles entered the house, only JJ and I were awake and present. The evidence will show that after we put JJ in the rental car, that Charles came back into the residence to receive his phone, leaving JJ in the front seat of the rental car with the engine running. He was 7 years old.
She thought she ate with that 7 years old Mark. Yeah. It's not funny, obviously, but what I'm laughing about is like the absurdity of Lori, where she's like, he was 7 years old. I know, please. These are my opening statements. Don't gasp too loudly or clutch your pearls. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, girl, you were the cause of this. Like, what are you talking about? fault. This is what happens, okay? And this is why I think, like, the absurdity of it, like, humors me. But, and I'm talking about Sarah Boone, Lori, Daryl Brooks, like, these people who, like, represent themselves as these crazy things, right? Is because in their world, she sees this as other people's fault. When it's so obvious, like, to anyone, okay? It's like, girl, I don't know if I would tell people that or emphasize it as her trying to be all dramatic. We're getting ready to get to major drama, right? With her and the opening statements by her, like, he was 7 years old. And I don't know if she said this yet or not. I can't remember. We might be getting to it. Somebody hold my tongue. We'll listen to the next segment, and then I'll give you my thoughts on her and the phone and the little fight that took place.
The evidence will show that Charles began to scream at me when I refused to hand him his phone.
Okay, so that part right there, I'm glad I waited. Why on earth would you put that in your opening statements? Even we know she did it, right? Why would you put that in your opening statements? Because this is my opinion, is she was instigating the fight that took place. Why would you go grab his phone and not give it to him? I mean, are we in middle school? I mean, seriously. So I'm like, why? That tells the jury so much right there. I mean, I'm thinking, right? I typically come at these cases, and in my world, my perspective is out of, like, if I'm on the jury. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't have the credentials. I don't have the cosmetology credential. Okay, I just don't. So it's like, in my world, I'm looking at it that way, and I'm like, if I was on the jury and heard that, I'd be like, huh? Why would you do that? It would give me insight into her behavior, even like on a daily basis before this happened.
The evidence will show that Charles' screaming woke up Tylie and Alex. The evidence will show that Tylie came out of her room with a bat to protect me, her mother, from her stepfather, Charles Val.
Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough. She's going to start sniffling in here. Full well knowing, my personal opinion is that Charles's last moments were spent in this debacle that Lori created with her laughing and mocking at him in like a nanny boo-boo kind of way, right? And like that level of immaturity. And now she wants to go up here and start trying to cry. She came out to protect her mother. You know, and it's like, what did you poison her with? Now, it's understandable in some situations where it's like, when you get into parents and step parents and this and that, whatever, that, you know, there's going to be, you know, especially teenagers, stuff like this, like there's going to be moodiness, there's going to be things. That's normal, right? But I think that Lori would probably have been the type, and again, I don't know her, but maybe people who give us insight like Colby and Crusher, people who dealt with her, I feel like she would have been the type to exploit that divide, if that makes sense, to garner attention, especially towards the end where she was like, you know, wanting to get with Chad Daybell and whatnot. She would have used that to her benefit, clearly, as she's doing now.
The evidence will show that Tylie and Charles fought over the bat, and that after a struggle over the bat, Tylie fell onto the ground, and Charles lifted up the bat to hit Tylie with the bat. The evidence will show that Alex then intervened to protect Tylie from being hit with the bat. He did not have a gun. He was not wearing a shirt. He was pulling up his jeans because he just woke up and came into the room where he heard the screaming. The evidence will show that Alex and Charles got into a physical struggle for the bat and fell onto the ground.
Okay, so you hear her trying to be like, he didn't have no gun. He was putting his britches on. You know, all that right there. I do not believe that Charles was coming after Tylie in the way that Lori describes. And even Tylie, and correct me if I'm wrong here, we just watched her interview the other night. I felt like she said that he grabbed it, like she poked or something. Well, what I'm getting at is Tylie's version is very subdued of what Lori's describing. The part where Tylie was involved in it, you know what I'm saying? So if what she's saying is true and wasn't something that she was told to say by her mother, you know, but with Tylie, this whole thing of like, well, he fell and he got up to strike her with it, I don't think that that's how that went. Again, do I expect anything else? Now, side note, the water work she's doing, y'all, please, honestly, you know, as if to, I mean, and I'm just going to say this, I can't stand Alex. I'm sorry. Like, and yes, I get it's the obvious, right? He killed all these people, you know, his niece and nephew. And like, I mean, there's good reason to. But it's also his behavior that we saw coming out of the house, talking to the cops, the whole 9 yards. It's just, it's so infuriating.
The evidence will show that Tylie, who was on the ground, was lifted up by me and sent outside to get away from the struggle and to protect JJ, who was still in the running car, in the rental car in the driveway.
I was waiting for her to be like, and reminder, he was 7 years Oh, now in all seriousness, I did like when you hear like this, like that whole little voice in your head's like, where's JJ? He's just in the car. Oh my gosh. But again, Lori is the instigator of this, right? It's like, she's trying to play it off like this whole thing here of this going on and like, but the children were in the car. And it's like, yeah, girl, because you made that situation happen. And now you're trying to use it as an excuse to garner sympathy with the jury. I'm not buying this at all, right? It absolutely infuriates me. And, on that note too, now I don't know the whole family, right? I've not personally at all. Mostly I've sat here through chats, talked with Crash Up, CrimeCon, Larry, Kay, Colby. What I'm getting at is they all seem pretty down-to-earth people, right? Lori to me seems like the air quote odd man out in this scenario. The attention seeking, like that kind of an energy. And so that's why too, when she describes this whole scenario, with the interactions, I know, she's not seeing her talking other specific things, but just like just throughout the case, not just here in the opening is what I'm getting at. It doesn't sit right because it's just like something's not adding up. The energy that the rest of the family gives off that we see is very different than Lori. Okay. Like it's just this very attention seeking, me kind of a thing. And in situations like this where children have been killed and whatnot, it doesn't bode well. Okay. So, and I apologize also, y'all. The dogs are starting to get a little, rambunctious over here. So I'm like it's major treat time over here for them. They're loving this. They're like, we love Lori's opening statement. Right? They love this. Let's keep going.
The evidence will show that after the struggle on the ground between Charles and Alex, that Charles prevailed with the bat and began to come towards me with the bat as I ran away from him into the kitchen.
Charles prevailed with the bat. Give her a quarter for that word. She's got that one. She's been waiting all night to say that word. She's like, I'm going to work the word prevailed into this. That's going to sound really good. She's like, oh, here it is.
Evidence will show that at some point while I was running away from Charles, who was chasing me with the bat, that Alex apparently retrieved his gun. The evidence will show that I ran outside to the children and that Alex shot Charles in self-defense. The evidence will show that Tylie and I had both run outside without shoes.
Without shoes. She acts like this is like a huge thing right here, right? The evidence will show, Alex went and got a gun. Like it was like just so happened to have it with him, right? And again, I'm being very biased in this because I don't believe a word she's saying. I think this is all completely intentional. I know I hate using that word too, but it is what it is. And then the little tears mixed in with this, it's just infuriating. It is absolutely infuriating.
The evidence will show that JJ was still in the front seat of the rental car, with the engine running and struggling to get out of the car, and Tylie was trying to keep him in. The evidence will show that Tylie and I got into the rental car with JJ and drove away. The evidence will show you that I drove the children away from the residence towards JJ's school. Can I grab a tissue?
Yes.
Cannot roll my eyes hard enough over that one. Can I grab a tissue? I'm surprised she wasn't more dramatic about it, right? Like to the jurors, like, jurors, please hold on for a moment. I can't make eye contact with you anymore because there's so many tears in my eyes. I'm going to need to break momentarily to ask the judge for a Kleenex while I'm crying, okay? Please don't hold this against me while I'm crying, okay? I'm just like, girl, go home. I guess you can't, right? Go back to prison.
The evidence will show that I drove the children through the Burger King drive-thru that Charles had promised JJ. The evidence will show that we continued to drive towards JJ's school and that the gate was not yet open at JJ's school. So we drove a block west of the school to a Walgreens where I ran in to purchase flip-flops for Tylie and myself so that we could walk JJ into school on the hot pavement. The evidence will show that Tylie and I returned directly to our residence where we met with police in our driveway.
Now, I'll give her this. She is connecting all the dots because she has some really bad evidence against her. Shows her like just nonchalantly driving through a Burger King, going to get the flip-flops, doing this and that. And it's like, you just left a house where your ex-husband was shot and killed. You're pretending like you didn't know that happened. And you're doing all these regular things, even the act of taking JJ to school. And you heard her also, we took him to the Burger King that Charles had promised him. We wanted life to be as normal for him at that point. And it's just like, no, you were on the phone with 911 at home in the car waiting for them to show up. That's the only acceptable thing, right?
The evidence will show that we were spoken to by the Chandler police officers. And the evidence will show that Tylie and I were told by the Chandler police detectives that Charles had passed away.
But the evidence will show that she contacted Alex minutes after he unalived Charles. She knew when she showed up about this, and they'll immediately on the witness stand, not immediately, but like a few witnesses in or whatever, or a couple of witnesses in, present evidence that shows completely the contrary to this.
The evidence will show that we were put into a police van and driven to the Chandler Police Department. The evidence will show that Alex was taken by police in a police car to the Chandler Police Department, and that we were all three separated into interrogation rooms and we were each interviewed. The evidence will show that next, Tylie and I were brought back together into a room at the Chandler Police Department and were introduced to a victim's advocate who was very kind to us. The evidence will show that after speaking to the victim's advocate, that Tylie, Alex, and myself were put back into the police van and driven back to our residence. We were directed by the Chandler detectives to take the rental car and return later to the residence after we picked up JJ from school. The evidence will show that we did as instructed by the Chandler detectives.
We haven't got to the little pool party yet, right? Or forgetting to tell everybody that Charles is dead, or any of the regular things that you would do, okay? She's like, we just did what we were instructed. But again, it's her opening. I get it. She's trying to not be guilty, okay? So it is what it is, but there's a lot of plot holes in this.
The evidence will show that we drove to Alex's residence where we attended to the wound on the back of his head. The evidence will show that Alex was then contacted by the Chandler detectives to return to the residence so that Alex could walk them through the events that occurred with the detectives at the residence.
The wound on his head, what'd you do? Kiss it and make it better? I mean, honestly, I'm convinced that she's the one who caused it. I mean, until I hear otherwise.
The evidence will show that Alex, Tylie, and I did return to the residence as instructed. And the evidence will show that Alex entered into the residence with Detective Moffett, but that Tylie and I were met by Detective Inkland in the front yard. The evidence will show that at the time, Detective Inkland asked Tylie and myself if we had Charles' cell phone. Tylie retrieved Charles' cell phone from the rental car and gave it to Detective Inkland at 3:11 p.m. on July 11th, 2019. And at that time, Charles' phone was placed in the custody of Chandler police detectives.
Now, mind you, they already took the chance, her and Alex, to go look through all of it, get screenshots, see all the conversations, so on and so forth, which was going to put other people's lives in jeopardy, unfortunately.
The evidence will show that Detective Inkland asked us if we knew the passcode on Charles' phone, which Tylie proceeded to give to Detective Inkland. The evidence will show that Tylie and I left the residence to pick up JJ from school, while Alex remained at the residence with the detectives. The evidence will show that by the time Tylie, JJ, and I returned to the residence, that all police, EMS, CSI, and detectives were gone from the residence and only Alex remained. The evidence will show that the next day, I contacted Chandler Police to inform them that Charles' belongings were still at the hotel.
Another thing, too, that she leaves out in all this is motivations, right? There's a reason she wants to get into Charles's stuff, right? She's already spending the money, number one. In her mind, she's like, when do we get the check? Literally, probably that afternoon, she's going to already swiping the ATM. Why haven't they deposited the inheritance? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that she's leaving out. And again, I understand why. She's the defendant. She's trying to be not guilty in this. Totally get it, right? But there are major plot holes here that you can't really get around. It's almost like she didn't have time to look at all the evidence or didn't care. I don't know.
I asked the detective if I should go get them, and I was told that they would take care of it. The evidence will show that I asked the detectives what should we do next? And they directed us that they would contact us in about 3 weeks after their supervisor passed off their reports, and Alex could go to the police station and retrieve his gun. The evidence will show that the last thing I heard from Chandler Police Department until June of 2021, 2 years later, when I received a grand jury indictment from them for this alleged crime.
This alleged crime. Now, here's the thing, too. Once everything started getting added up and their behavior being looked at, and I'm talking about like Alex, Lori, the footage, the body cam, all the stuff that we're seeing now in trial. I mean, come on, right? Because if you watch the interviews and whatnot that Lori did, especially Lori, where she's in there kind of playing like the DV wife role, at first glances, it looks like they're eating it up, right? They're just like, oh, yes, because all the stories that they're hearing are adding up, and I shouldn't say adding up, they're corroborated, right? You have Alex saying this, you have Tylie saying some things. Although, to me, comparing what Tylie said to Alex and Lori, there's a gap, right? And this isn't adding up as much as it does with these other two over here. And the adults in the situation would have motivation to lie if somebody was going to.
The evidence will show that Chandler Police treated this incident as self-defense.
I'm going to object to that.
Objection sustained. The jury should disregard that last statement.
State needs to be careful. Lori's in that portal with Zulema. I'm telling you, she's going to have whirlwinds, hurricanes, all sorts of stuff coming down that house by the time she gets home.
The evidence will show you that my brother, Alex Cox, passed away on December 12th, 2019, almost exactly 5 months to the day after Charles, my husband, passed away. The evidence will show that Alex passed away from a blood clot in his lung.
Objection. Again.
I'll sustain the objection. It's not relevant for this matter.
The evidence will show you that I am the only person being charged with this crime.
I'm going to object to the relevance of that.
Sustained.
She's the only one left, right?
As the state has mentioned, they are alleging that insurance money was my motive. Social Security was my motive. Spouses having insurance policies is not a crime. Collecting Social Security is not a crime. Self-defense is not a crime. A family tragedy is not a crime. It's a tragedy. Thank you.
She had to do that. Thank you. Oh, a family tragedy is not a tragedy, Bo. It's a crime. Or no, she said... Look, that was me letting it slip out. Imagine if she let a Freudian slip or whatever. If she said, a family tragedy is not a tragedy, it's a crime. And I'd be like, exactly. Case damn closed. Let's go home, everybody. So yeah, the opening statements, again, bias aside, obviously she's the defendant. She doesn't want to be in trouble. I get it. That being said, she's leaving out a lot of context, which, hey, that can be said for both sides at times. But she's leaving out key ingredients of... Well, number one, also evidence, right? The evidence will show opposite of what a lot of she's saying. The evidence will show a conspiracy. The evidence will show all this behind-the-scenes stuff going on. The evidence will show a crime scene set up. I think one thing with Lori is she's been used to, at least in the earlier part of her life, being able to kind of get what she wants and somebody not questioning her. And whether it's through manipulation or whatever the case is. And so she probably has this kind of false belief of, well, I can just come in here and tell my version and that's what's going to fly. I do not believe that Lori thinks she will be not guilty of this, right? I think her main motivation is to act like she's on a crusade, as she said in the interviews, and also just to get back at family members and people that she feels like told on her, and especially Kay Woodcock. I really honestly feel like the people who Lori, especially Kay Woodcock, is going to be interviewing or questioning is the reason why she's doing this trial. It's like trying to get the last word in. So yeah, this is going very interestingly so far, and I'm recording this video on the very first day. If there's major standout parts of the trial like this, I'll cover them in this capacity to like really break it down and talk about it. Obviously closing arguments, things of that nature. And if there's anything in between, other than that, I'll just kind of be doing my daily updates and thoughts. And obviously we're streaming it on the channel next door, or you know what I'm saying? Not next door, but in the podcast channel. Good Lord, y'all. Anyways, that's it. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm dying to hear. I do appreciate if you're still watching. And if you are in the comment section, let me know why you're down there. If you could, pretty please, drop some little sofas off for myself, Rosco and Spirit, And Bo, are you going to come over? And Bo... And Luke, who is not, he's on the floor looking up at me like you're crazy. But for Bo and Luke and the rest of the Sofa Squad, that way we'll have a place to hang out, talk about this case, little puppies, and all the other cases we do talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we all meander our way down there to do all that, I'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Rosco on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.